Fáilte Rash, welcome back. Now, Tom Fosig Gobber Aramorcha. I'm still working on my table. This was the extended dining table that I showed you last week. I've now taken it apart. Half of the top is in front of me here. I've split it into 3 boards to remove the old surface finish and to get the boards flat again, because when it's all joined up, it's going to be one particular piece, one tabletop. So we're going from something old, which suited the old colonial type houses, the big estate type houses, to something modern, which will fit into a property in a modern context. So that's a good thing to be able to do that. And we're working with solid woods. Now the tabletop that I have here, that's what you see in front of me, the boards there. This is one of the rails from it. And then we also have the legs here, the bulbous type legs. So there's a bit of making good with them, and you can see that I'll come to them a little while later. Now just back to the tops. When we're dealing with antiques, you can tell an awful about the provenance of a particular piece when you go to take it apart, and the people that would have worked on them in their day, long before I was even on this planet. So in this case, the timber is very rich looking timber. I know it's a type of mahogany, or it is a mahogany, but there's so many, mahogany is such a very generic name because there's different types from mahogany from all over the world or from the tropics. Now, in this case, I knew it wasn't Sapelli. I knew it wasn't Brazilian because I know them, very familiar with them. Honduras, I knew it wasn't Honduras either. So I kind of narrowed it down. And I was looking and thinking about it and looking it up a little bit, and I was feeling its density, watching its grain pattern, or looking at it, I should say, and looking at its characteristics and how it planed when I went through the machines. But it's only when I went to shoot the edges, which is to get a perfectly straight line between the edges to make them true, that I would never have probably put it on camera before, but when you're working in fine furniture, all your senses come into play. Sight, touch, smells, etc. come into play. So you're using your faculties there and your dexterity, etc. But the senses themselves, sound as well, comes into play. When I went to plane the timber, and even though the timber in this case is definitely over 100 years old, I got a distinct smell of it. And it's a smell I remembered back to my apprenticeship days, almost 50 years ago now. And I knew immediately, that's Utilly. I just knew the smell of it. There's a very strong, distinct smell from Utilly. So that's what I have, and it fits the bill for its density, and it's a dark colour as well. And it's ideal for taking stains, which meant that back in the day when they were importing this stuff, that they knew that this would take a good dye and take a good colour and make it very rich in its surroundings when it was finally polished. Another thing also is that people making fine furniture back at the turn of the 20th century also knew that the timbers were becoming scarce, and they were into conservation as well way back then, long before we started even talking about it. Now an example of that is straight in front of me here. This is the rail from the table itself, and if you look closely at that, if I pipe that very close to the camera there, you can see that there's a veneer. I'll pull it back towards me now. We have a backing. The rail itself is not mahogany. There's just a 1 millimeter veneer on the edge there, full millimeter, planted onto the front edge there, and that's what was polished. So they were using conservation as a point back then. They weren't using mahogany in the rails. They were using a substitute. Now that substitute was very important as well, because it had to have stability and it had to have strength. Why? Because it was an extended dining table, and if the mechanisms, the sliding mechanisms there, the little rails, they would lock up if this material wasn't stable. So hence, I needed to know what this material is as well. So take a shot off the surface of it, and straight away it reveals itself to be none other than elm, which is now no longer available, unfortunately, due to Dutch elm disease. So the elm was used for its strength. It's a hardwood. It's a kind of a soft hardwood, but it's a hardwood nonetheless. It's a stable hardwood, and it's an exceptional wood for holding its stability, and it also has the strength properties required for an extended dining table. So none other than elm, and material I absolutely love. And the veneer is on here. You can't see it there, but you can see it on the end grain. So the veneer went onto the end, 1 millimeter veneer. Now you can see it doesn't look too healthy at the moment, and that's because these were French polished, which was shellacked. And shellac is a very soft finish, and over the years, imagine 100 years, dirty hands or paw prints and dust and dirt and grime, heat, cold, the dirt and the grime gets actually intermixed into the surface finish itself. So that's 100 years of DNA that I'm touching there, and dirt and grime that I'm touching right there. And I'm going to take that off, and we'll be back down to the veneer as it was. So that's where I'm at to date. One other thing just to finally point out, when you're going to dye down the surface of a tabletop like this, the joints that we have here, they have to be absolutely 100% correct. And you may get the surface finish off a machine. Lots of people will just work off the machine and joint them. But that leaves little scallops along the edge, along here, little scallops along here. So what I always do is I shoot them with the plane. Now, if these are already done, I'll shoot them to get the length perfectly straight, no ripples whatsoever. It's a smooth, silky smooth there, silky smooth to the touch. And I'll have the board on here, second board. These are already, it's called shooting the edges. And it's probably one of the most difficult testing things you can do as a cabinet maker, to shoot a long straight edge, because it has to be straight and it also has to be square. And you achieve that with a very sharp hand plane, and you check it with a board like that up against its surface, make sure it's perfectly flat. And when you achieve that, you have a top ready to go back together again. One other point on these, even though this timber is very stable, it's over 100 years old, so its ability from expanding and contracting, it's very seasoned, let's just say, at this stage. I leave the tiniest hairline gap in between the boards in the centre here, so that any excess heat comes on from the end grain side will be catered for in case it had a tendency to split on the ends. By leaving a hairline in here, if I shine a lamp through there, the joint, I can actually see the light coming through the other side. That's the essence of excellent cabinet making from the point of view of clamping your boards. When they're clamped, you're putting pressure on the centre, and any heat that comes on the end grain, that's where it's most susceptible. That takes the gap into account, so that if there's any shrinkage here at this point, it's already taken care of from the centre of the board in the middle before I start. One other vital point about that is that when the joint is absolutely as good as you can humanly get it, well then when you dye it down, if there was any slight discrepancy at all along the glue line, the dye will show it up, and you don't want that. So anyway, look, it could be a lot of useless information for some people, but Sinead and Lawn you, that's all I'll do for today, or say for today. Mahuas vacant, good on you for looking. Tug the bug, eh? Take it easy, and it's feckin' to galua. We'll see you soon. Slán go fóill. Bye for now.